Mirabelle had been working on the case for months. As a seasoned FBI agent, she was no stranger to danger, but this mission felt different. She was deep undercover, investigating a multimillionaire drug trafficking ring that operated out of a quiet suburban estate. The criminals were careful, using luxury homes as fronts for their illegal business, making it hard to track them down. But Mirabelle was getting close to uncovering the truth, and today was a critical day in her operation. Dressed in casual clothes to blend in with the neighborhood, Mirabelle walked through the estate, her mind focused on her next move. She had a meeting with an informant who was ready to reveal key information about the drug ring's leader. As she made her way to the agreed-upon spot, she noticed a police cruiser pull up nearby. She didn't think much of it at first. Police patrolling wealthy neighborhoods wasn't unusual. But then, the officer stepped out. It was John, a local cop with a reputation for being tough, but not always fair. His eyes narrowed as he spotted Mirabelle walking alone. In his mind, she didn't look like she belonged there. To him, a young black woman in a wealthy estate must have been up to something suspicious. "Hey, you," John called out, striding toward her. "What are you doing here?" Mirabelle kept her cool. She had to stay in character, not blow her cover. "Just taking a walk," she said casually, glancing around. She didn't want to make any sudden moves, knowing the situation could escalate if she wasn't careful. John, however, wasn't satisfied. He looked her up and down with disdain. "This isn't a place for loitering. Show me some ID." Mirabelle hesitated. Revealing her identity as an FBI agent could ruin months of undercover work, but she also knew the encounter was getting tense. She reached for her wallet, planning to explain the situation. But before she could even speak, John grabbed her wrist roughly. "Don't get smart with me," he sneered, pulling her toward his patrol car. "You're coming with me for questioning. Let's see what you're really doing around here." A crowd began to form as neighbors peeked out of their windows, watching the scene unfold. Mirabelle felt a surge of anger, but she remained calm. Her job was too important to risk a confrontation now. She knew she was in a delicate situation. "Officer, you don't understand," Mirabelle began, trying to reason with him. But John cut her off. "I understand just fine. You're up to no good, and I'm not letting you get away with it." He shoved her into the back of the police car, ignoring her attempts to explain. It was a humiliating experience, one that stung even more because of the clear racial bias behind his actions. John didn't care who she was. To him, she was guilty by appearance alone. As the car sped toward the police station, Mirabelle sat in silence, her mind racing. She could easily blow her cover and reveal her FBI badge, but doing so would jeopardize her investigation into the drug trafficking ring. She needed to bide her time and stay patient, even though every moment felt like a punch to her dignity. Little did John know, the woman he had just humiliated and arrested was far more than he had imagined. And soon, his actions would come back to haunt him in ways he couldn't possibly expect. Mirabelle sat quietly in the holding cell at the police station, her emotions swirling inside her. She had been through tough situations before, but this one stung deeply. John had humiliated her in front of onlookers, treating her like a criminal without even bothering to listen. The irony was that she was the one investigating a dangerous multimillionaire drug trafficking ring, while he was so focused on his prejudices that he had no idea who he was dealing with. In her mind, Mirabelle replayed the events of the day. She knew she could have revealed her identity as an FBI agent and ended the situation instantly, but that would have blown her entire operation. She was too close to cracking the case. The drug ring she was investigating had ties to powerful people, and any slip-up could not only cost her the mission, but also her life. The traffickers had eyes everywhere. They would vanish the moment they suspected the FBI was onto them. Mirabelle had been undercover for months, carefully gathering information, gaining the trust of informants, and working toward bringing down the cartel. Today's meeting with her informant had been crucial. But now, thanks to John's reckless actions, that meeting was delayed, and the entire case was at risk. John, meanwhile, was feeling proud of himself. Back in his office, he talked loudly with his colleagues, making sure everyone knew how he had arrested someone who looked suspicious. Another one of those types, he boasted to a fellow officer. She was probably up to no good. You know how it is in these neighborhoods. People who don't belong coming in and causing trouble. Some of the other officers in the precinct felt uneasy about the way John handled things. They knew he had a reputation for jumping to conclusions, especially when it came to minorities. But no one dared to challenge him openly. John had been on the force for years, and his tough attitude, while problematic, had never been called into question. Hours passed, and Mirabelle remained in the cell, her frustration growing. She wasn't sure how long she could wait before her cover was blown. She hadn't been able to check in with her FBI handler, and the entire operation was at a standstill. At any moment, she feared the drug traffickers might get wind of the delay and change their plans. Time was running out. Eventually, an officer approached her cell. "You've got a phone call," he said, his tone stiff and formal. Mirabelle's heart raced. It had to be her FBI handler. She stood up and followed the officer to the phone. Sure enough, the voice on the other end was calm, but filled with urgency. "Mirabelle, what's going on? You missed the meetup with the informant. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Mirabelle replied in code, knowing she couldn't say too much. "But I've run into a complication. I need more time." Her handler understood instantly. "We'll handle it. Don't blow your cover. We'll intervene soon." Mirabelle hung up the phone, feeling a small sense of relief, but knowing the situation was still precarious. She had to be patient. Help was on the way, but until then, she needed to endure whatever John threw her way. She wouldn't let his prejudice derail her mission. Meanwhile, John continued his arrogant behavior, unaware that his world was about to be turned upside down. He had no idea the consequences that were coming his way. In his mind, he had done his job, and no one could question him. As the sun began to set outside the station, tensions were rising inside. The clock was ticking, and soon the truth would come out, changing everything for both John and Mirabelle in ways neither of them could have imagined. The morning light filtered through the blinds of the police station as John swaggered through the hallways, still proud of the arrest he had made the previous day. He hadn't bothered to check on Mirabelle, the woman he had thrown into a holding cell. In his mind, she was just another troublemaker caught in the wrong place. He was confident he had done his job, protecting the upscale neighborhood from someone he assumed didn't belong there. But as John sipped his coffee, something unexpected happened. The police captain, a serious man with decades of experience, burst into the office with a look of urgency. "John, in my office." "Now," he said sternly, his voice low and commanding. John frowned, confused by the captain's tone. He followed the captain, assuming it was about some routine paperwork or a case update. But the moment they stepped into the office and the door closed behind them, John knew something was wrong. The captain's face was pale, and there was a tightness around his mouth. "John," the captain began, his voice barely containing the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" John blinked, still clueless. "What do you mean?" "I handled that arrest by the book. She was acting suspicious, and I—" The captain cut him off, slamming a file down on his desk. "That woman you arrested. She's an FBI agent, John. A highly respected FBI agent working undercover on a massive drug trafficking case in that neighborhood." John's heart skipped a beat. "What?" he stammered, his face draining of color. "No, that can't be. I thought she was." "You thought wrong," the captain growled, leaning across the desk, his eyes blazing with fury. "You arrested Agent Mirabelle Thompson, who has been deep undercover for months trying to crack open a multi-million-dollar drug ring. You've not only jeopardized her mission, but you've also put her life and the entire case at risk. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done?" John's mouth went dry. Panic surged through him as the reality of the situation hit him like a freight train. He had humiliated and wrongfully arrested an FBI agent. And worse, she had been working on something far bigger than anything he could have imagined. The captain shook his head, disgusted. The FBI is furious. They've already called in, and they're demanding answers. Mirabelle was supposed to meet with an informant last night, and because of you, that didn't happen. You've compromised months of work. Do you know what that means? The entire drug ring might vanish now. John slumped into a chair, his mind racing. He had been so blinded by his own prejudice, so convinced of his authority, that he hadn't even considered the possibility that he was wrong. And now he was paying the price. Just then, there was a knock at the door. The captain opened it, and in walked Mirabelle, free from the holding cell, and now standing tall and calm in her FBI gear. Her expression was cold, her eyes piercing through John, as if he were nothing more than a foolish rookie. "I could have revealed my identity at any time," Mirabelle said, her voice steady, but filled with controlled anger. "But I chose not to because I wanted to see how far your arrogance would go." John couldn't meet her gaze. His mind raced with thoughts of his career, his reputation, and the consequences he now faced. This was no simple mistake. He had crossed a line, and there was no going back. "I'm sorry," John finally muttered, his voice small and pathetic, far from the proud officer he had been only hours before. Mirabelle didn't flinch. "Sorry isn't enough," she replied coldly. "You put lives at risk. My life, the lives of innocent people, all because you couldn't see past your own biases." The captain stepped forward. "John, you're suspended. We'll be launching an internal investigation immediately, and believe me, the FBI won't let this slide." As John sat there, frozen in shock, Mirabelle turned and walked out of the office, her head held high. She had endured his humiliation, but in the end, it was John who faced the consequences, and he knew, deep down, that his career was all but over. In the days following the incident, John's world came crashing down around him. Word of his wrongful arrest of an undercover FBI agent spread like wildfire, not just through his precinct, but across the city. The news media picked up the story, adding fuel to the already burning fire. Headlines read, "Racist cop arrests FBI agent in undercover drug bust, and officer's prejudice jeopardizes major investigation." The public outcry was fierce. People demanded answers, and the police department faced enormous pressure to act swiftly. John, once a confident and proud officer, was now a man consumed with fear and regret. He was suspended, pending an internal investigation, and faced possible termination, not to mention legal repercussions for misconduct. Mirabelle, meanwhile, had returned to her mission. The FBI had quickly intervened, and thanks to her sharp thinking, they were able to salvage the undercover operation. Despite the delay caused by John's actions, the FBI continued to track the drug ring, and were now even closer to bringing down the traffickers. But for Mirabelle, the sting of what had happened still lingered. It wasn't just about the botched arrest. It was about the way she had been treated, humiliated simply because of her race. She had faced discrimination before, but this time it had nearly cost her a mission she had worked on for months. She knew she had a choice to make: let the situation pass, or use it as an opportunity to push for real change. A few weeks later, the internal investigation into John's behavior was completed. The findings were damning. John had violated multiple protocols during Mirabelle's arrest and had acted on personal biases rather than professional judgment. The police department had no choice but to terminate him. On the day he was officially let go, John sat in his now empty office, staring at his badge on the desk. His pride, his sense of power, everything he had built his career on was gone. He had been too arrogant to see the damage he was causing, and now it was too late to fix it. He was no longer Officer John, just a man facing the consequences of his own prejudices. But while John's career ended in disgrace, Mirabelle's influence began to grow. She hadn't just saved the investigation. She had become a voice for change within law enforcement. The story of her wrongful arrest sparked national discussions about racial profiling and the need for better training in police departments across the country. One afternoon, as Mirabelle wrapped up a briefing with her FBI team, she received an unexpected call from the police captain. He asked to meet with her privately, and though hesitant, Mirabelle agreed. The captain nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "We are, Agent Thompson, and we will be better because of this." As Mirabelle left the station that day, she felt a sense of closure. What had begun as a humiliating and infuriating experience had turned into an opportunity for growth, not just for her, but for the entire system. She had stood strong in the face of injustice, and now real change was on the horizon. In the captain's office, he looked at her with a sincere expression. "Agent Thompson, I want to personally apologize for what happened. John's actions were inexcusable, and we are taking steps to ensure something like this never happens again. We've started mandatory bias training for all officers, and we're working closely with the FBI to improve relations." Mirabelle listened, her expression calm but thoughtful. She appreciated the apology, but she knew words weren't enough. "Thank you for the apology," she said finally. "But real change takes more than training. It takes accountability. I hope your department is committed to making those changes long-term." As she walked out, Mirabelle reflected on her journey. She had endured prejudice and bias, but she hadn't let it define her. Instead, she used it as fuel for something greater. She wasn't just an FBI agent on a mission. She was a symbol of resilience, justice, and the power of standing up for what's right. And in the end, she knew that her actions had made a lasting impact, not only on the investigation, but on the fight for fairness and equality in law enforcement. Trust you enjoyed the story. Kindly subscribe to our channel, like and share. Watch out for our next uplifting tales.